He built an empire with her by his side. But when success came, Elias Carter traded his pregnant wife, Naomi Brooks, for his white assistant, Victoria Hayes. One stormy evening in Brookhaven Estate, Atlanta. Elias stood at the marble doorway of his mansion, the mansion Naomi helped design, helped pay for, helped dream into being. He pointed to the rain-soaked street. "Get out," he said. His voice was calm, almost cold. Naomi, 7 months pregnant, didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the faint kick of life inside her, the only thing that still connected her to the man in front of her. Victoria stood behind him, lips curved, certain she had finally won, but Naomi looked past them both. Her calm was unsettling. A siren echoed. A police car stopped at the gate, and the officer stepped out. Not for Naomi, but for Elias, because the house he thought was his belonged to her. If you think you know how this story ends, stay with me. You're about to find out what real karma looks like. Years before the mansion, there was a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Atlanta. Peeling paint, a second-hand desk, 2 laptops that overheated after midnight. That was where Elias Carter and Naomi Brooks built their dream. They worked side by side, sharing coffee, ideas, and sleepless nights. Naomi wasn't just a wife-in-waiting. She was the mind behind Carter Tech's first prototype. Her notebook was filled with sketches and plans Elias later turned into presentations. They promised each other that when the company made it big, they'd never forget these nights. The laughter over ramen noodles, the way success felt like something they were building with love. Back then, Elias looked at Naomi as if she was the whole reason he breathed. He used to say, "We'll build an empire together, baby. And when it stands tall, it'll have your name on it too." But success has a way of testing promises. Sometimes the walls you build together can become the ones that shut one of you out. Carter Tech grew faster than they imagined. Investors came calling. Reporters wanted interviews. Elias wore his first tailored suit, and Naomi stood proudly beside him. When she found out she was pregnant, he lifted her off the ground, laughing. "Our timing's perfect," he said. "When we go public, our baby will be here to see it." Naomi believed him. She believed in everything he said. While Elias handled the investors, she managed the product design, the brand story, the heart of the company. They were 2 halves of one dream, love and ambition woven together, and, for a while, it worked. At night, they'd sit on the balcony of their small townhouse looking out at the Atlanta skyline. He'd hold her hand and whisper, "When we ring that bell on Wall Street, I'll buy you a house with windows bigger than this whole room." She'd smile. "I don't need the house, Elias. Just you." But when dreams grow too big, they can cast long shadows. The first shadow arrived in the form of Victoria Hayes. Young, sharp, blonde hair always perfectly in place. Elias called her the best assistant I've ever had. Naomi met her at the company gala, the night Carter Tech reached its first $1 million contract. Victoria was polite, but her eyes lingered on Elias longer than necessary. Naomi noticed. So did the room. Victoria knew how to make him feel powerful. She laughed at every joke, finished his sentences, reminded him how brilliant he was. And when Naomi spoke about the company, Victoria always found a way to turn the spotlight back to him. It was subtle at first, a comment here, a compliment there, but it worked. Elias began spending longer hours at the office, more working dinners, more last-minute meetings. Naomi told herself it was just stress. Success demanded sacrifice. But deep down, something in her chest began to tighten. The quiet fear that she was watching her own life being rewritten, one late night at a time. Weeks passed. The distance between them grew, invisible but heavy. Elias no longer kissed her goodbye in the mornings. He checked his phone at dinner. His laughter came less often, replaced by long silences. Naomi waited up for him, the glow of the kitchen clock marking every hour. Each night, she rehearsed the same words. "Are we okay?" But when the sound of his car finally echoed in the driveway, her courage faded. Sometimes she'd see his reflection in the glass door, smiling at a message before stepping inside. He'd say it was work. She'd nod, pretending to believe. One night, Naomi pressed a hand against her growing belly and whispered, "He's just tired. He still loves us." But in her heart, she already knew. She wasn't afraid of losing her marriage. She was afraid of losing the man who once built dreams beside her, and finding in his place a stranger who only saw numbers, not love. The first crack had appeared. And when love starts to crack, it doesn't break all at once. It shatters quietly, one heartbeat at a time. That night, Naomi called Elias. It was late. The sound of laughter filled the background before he answered. A woman's voice followed. Soft, familiar. It was Victoria. Naomi froze. She didn't speak. She didn't ask who it was. Her heart understood what her mind refused to say. Elias cleared his throat. "Naomi, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back." Then the line went dead. She sat in the dark, phone still against her ear. The silence in that room was louder than any scream. The rain outside tapped against the window like a slow heartbeat. For the first time she felt her world tilt, not from anger, but from the weight of knowing she no longer belonged in the story she helped write. She whispered to herself, "He's just tired. It's just work." But her voice broke. Because lies don't always come from words. Sometimes they come from what isn't said at all. Days turned into weeks. Elias stopped hiding it. He started showing up at events with Victoria, hand in hand, smiling for cameras. Naomi watched it all from her phone screen. The man she loved standing beside another woman, the same man who once said she was his forever. At a charity gala, Naomi arrived unannounced. She wore the same black dress he'd once said made her look unstoppable. When their eyes met across the crowd, Elias looked away. Victoria didn't. She leaned in and kissed him under the spotlight. The crowd clapped. Naomi stood frozen, glass in hand. Her heart didn't shatter loudly. It cracked in silence. Later that night, she deleted every photo of them from her phone. Each swipe felt like peeling away a piece of her old self. The dream they built together was no longer hers. It now had another face, another name. The mansion in Brookhaven felt colder than winter. Naomi walked through empty halls where laughter used to live. The walls still echoed with old promises. She sat on the couch, holding their wedding photo. Two people smiling, unaware of how fragile happiness could be. Every corner of the house reminded her of him. The coffee mug he left by the sink, the scent of his cologne that lingered on the pillow. She pressed a hand against her stomach. The baby kicked, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. But loneliness has a way of drowning even the smallest hope. At night, she left the lights on, afraid of the silence. Outside, the city glowed, but inside her world had gone dim. She whispered to the baby, "We'll be okay, I promise." It was the first time she made a promise without knowing how to keep it. The next morning, Naomi stood in front of the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her heart tired. But behind the sadness, there was something new. Resolve. She picked up her phone and called her lawyer. "I want to review every document," she said. "Company shares, real estate, everything." For years, she had signed papers without question. Now, she wanted to understand what her signature was worth. At the firm's office, she sat across from a young attorney. He flipped through contracts, surprised. "Mrs. Carter," he said softly, "you own more than you think." Naomi nodded. No tears this time. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was focus. Walking out of the building, she felt something shift. The world outside hadn't changed, but she had. Night after night, Naomi worked quietly. She searched through files, old emails, hidden folders. Each document told a story. Of money moved, shares transferred, names erased. Elias thought she never looked at the numbers. He was wrong. She knew them better than he did. In her study, she created a folder marked "For Later." Inside, she kept proof, investments, passwords, every transaction he thought was buried. Naomi wasn't planning revenge, she was building protection. for herself, for her child. Under the dim desk light, she whispered, "You took my heart, but you won't take my future." Outside, the mansion slept. But in that quiet, Naomi woke up for the first time. Elias came home late, the sound of laughter following him through the door. Victoria walked beside him, confident, her heels clicking against the marble floor. When they saw Naomi standing by the staircase, both paused. Elias's smile faded. "You're still here?" His tone was sharp, like a man giving orders, not speaking to his wife. Victoria folded her arms, pretending to look away but waiting for Naomi's reaction. Naomi didn't move. She placed her hand gently on her stomach. "I live here," she said softly. Elias stepped closer, eyes cold. "Not anymore. Pack your things." His words hit harder than any storm. But Naomi didn't flinch. She simply stood, steady as stone. Rain began to fall outside. The lights flickered. In the silence, Elias whispered, "You wanted this. You made me do it." Naomi looked at him, not with anger, but disbelief. For a moment she remembered the man who once held her when they had nothing. Now he was unrecognizable, a stranger drunk on power. She whispered to herself, "You've already lost more than you know." Naomi turned slowly, her voice calm. "If you want me to leave, call the police." Elias laughed. "Fine." He pulled out his phone, confident this was the final act of control. Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed through the rain. 2 officers stepped inside the house. Elias pointed at Naomi. "She's trespassing. Remove her." The taller officer looked down at the documents Naomi held out. Property titles, signed contracts. His expression changed. "Mr. Carter," he said quietly, "this property is under Mrs. Naomi Carter's name. You're the one who'll need to leave." Elias froze. For the first time in years, he didn't have words. Victoria stepped back, face pale. Naomi didn't smile. She didn't speak. She simply stood there, hand on her belly, watching the man who once ruled everything walk past her toward the door. When the door shut behind him, she whispered, "You wanted me gone." But the house knew who it belonged to. Elias spent the night in a hotel downtown, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying every choice that led to this moment. By morning, his phone exploded with calls. His lawyer, his board members, his investors. Naomi had frozen company accounts, all legally. Half the board sided with her. The empire he'd built was crumbling before breakfast. Victoria's messages turned cold. By noon, she was gone, her number disconnected. He went to the office, but his badge no longer worked. Security guards stood at the door. He watched through the glass as Naomi entered the conference room. Calm, graceful, signing papers that once bore his name. For years, he had treated her as the woman behind his success. Now she stood in front of it. Elias pressed his hand to the glass, whispering, "How did it all slip away?" But the truth was simple. It didn't slip. He let it go. The mansion was quiet again. Naomi sat on the same couch where he once told her to leave. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray. She looked around. The untouched wine glasses, the half-folded blanket, the echo of his voice still hanging in the air. For the first time she could breathe. She wasn't happy. She wasn't proud. She was just still. The baby kicked softly. Naomi placed her hand on her belly and closed her eyes. Tears came, not from sorrow, but from release. Power didn't feel like revenge. It felt like peace earned through pain. She whispered, "We're safe now." The words didn't sound triumphant, only tired. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. She leaned back, letting the quiet fill her lungs. For years, she had carried him. Now, she carried only herself. Days later, Naomi walked into Carter Tech for the first time as CEO. Every head turned. Whispers followed her down the hallway. The woman they thought was just the founder's wife now led them. She didn't seek attention. She sought progress. She reviewed projects, signed contracts, made decisions Elias never noticed. Confidence replaced hesitation. Some employees waited for her to fail. She didn't. Revenue rose. The press praised her leadership. One article called her the woman who rebuilt what was never broken, herself. Naomi smiled at the headline but said nothing. At night, she worked late, just like in the old apartment years ago. Only this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was hers. She stood by the office window, the Atlanta skyline glowing below. A tear slipped down her cheek, but this one wasn't for loss, it was for survival. Elias Carter's name began to fade from headlines that once praised him. A week after Naomi's rise, news broke. Carter Tech was under investigation for financial misconduct. Emails surfaced showing funds shifted between shell accounts. The board distanced themselves. Lawyers called. Reporters waited outside his condo. Victoria Hayes vanished first. She leaked messages to the press claiming she'd been manipulated. Then she blocked his number. The woman who once clung to his arm now fed on his downfall. Elias tried to deny everything, but denial didn't stop the silence. The world he built on pride collapsed, piece by piece. He once believed money could buy loyalty. Now he couldn't even buy peace. Late at night, he scrolled through old photos. Naomi smiling beside him, back when the company was just a dream. He turned off the screen and whispered, "It should have been you, not her." Outside, sirens echoed in the distance. Inside, he sat alone, a man with everything except the one thing that mattered. Elias moved into a small apartment near the edge of downtown. No marble floors, no doormen, no one waiting for him. He slept on a thin mattress, ate takeout from paper boxes. The city lights outside no longer impressed him. They just reminded him how far he'd fallen. One night, he opened an old drawer and found a framed photo. Naomi was laughing, her hair messy, a streak of paint on her cheek. It was taken in that first apartment. Before success, before pride. He sat on the floor, holding the photo. For the first time in years, he said her name aloud. Naomi. There was no anger left in his voice, only regret. He realized the empire hadn't crumbled because of her. It fell because he forgot why he built it. He closed his eyes. The sound of her laughter echoed faintly in his mind. The sound of everything he once was. While Elias faced silence, Naomi faced pain, the kind that brings new life. Hours of labor, alone in the hospital room. Her hands gripped the sheets, her breath steady. When the cry finally filled the air, Naomi felt both relief and peace. The nurse smiled. "It's a girl." Naomi looked down at her daughter. Tiny fingers, soft breaths, eyes full of light. She named her Hope Carter. Hope. Because that was all she had left, and all she needed. In that moment, everything made sense. The heartbreak, the loss, the silence, it all led here. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead. "You're my beginning," she whispered. Outside, the morning sun touched the hospital window, and for the first time in a long while, Naomi smiled. Elias heard about the birth from a friend at the firm. He sat for hours before deciding to go. He brought no flowers, no gifts, just himself. At the hospital, he asked the nurse for permission. Naomi was resting, the baby asleep beside her. When she saw him standing by the door, she didn't speak. She didn't turn him away. Elias stepped closer, voice low. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted to see her." Naomi nodded once. He moved to the crib, staring at the small bundle wrapped in pink. The baby yawned. Something in his chest cracked open. "She looks like you," he whispered. Naomi didn't answer. Her silence wasn't rejection. It was understanding. He looked at her one last time and said, "Thank you for not shutting the door." Then he left quietly, tears hidden beneath the sound of his footsteps. Time passed. Elias didn't rebuild his company. He rebuilt himself. He started volunteering at a local community center, teaching coding to kids who couldn't afford school. At first, they didn't know who he was. He didn't tell them. He brought old laptops, fixed them, donated them. He smiled again. the kind of smile that didn't need cameras. One day, a student asked, "Were you always a teacher?" He paused, then said, "No, I was lost once, but helping you helps me find the way back." The room filled with laughter. For the first time in years, it sounded like something real. He walked home through quiet streets, hands empty, heart lighter. He didn't have Naomi, but he finally had peace. And for him, that was enough. A full year passed. The world kept turning, and Naomi learned to move with it. Carter Tech flourished under her leadership. She worked with quiet discipline, earning respect even from those who once doubted her. Every morning, she took Hope to daycare, then went straight to the office. She no longer measured success in numbers, but in peace. At lunch, she'd look at photos of Hope on her phone. The baby's smile reminded her that love could exist without pain. Her days were long but steady. Nights were filled with soft lullabies instead of arguments. Naomi was no longer someone's wife or someone's mistake. She was a mother, a builder, a survivor. Sometimes she'd stand by her office window, watching the sunset over Atlanta. In the fading light, she whispered, "We're okay now." And she was. On Hope's first birthday, Naomi sat at her desk holding a pen. She looked at the small invitation card, pale pink with silver edges. She wrote one name, Elias Carter. No long message, just an address, a date, and a time. Then she paused, wondering if he'd even come. Hope deserved to know where she came from. Not the mistakes, but the humanity behind them. Naomi sealed the envelope, pressing it closed with a sigh. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was something gentler. Acceptance. Later that day, she watched Hope crawl across the living room floor. The baby laughed, pure and free. Naomi smiled softly. "Your father should see that laugh," she whispered. Then she placed the envelope on the table, ready to send it out into the world. Elias hesitated at the doorway of Naomi's home. He had brought a small gift, a white teddy bear wrapped in brown paper. Inside, balloons hung from the ceiling. Hope sat in the middle of the room, wearing a pink dress, eyes wide with curiosity. When she saw him, she didn't cry. She smiled. That same soft curve Naomi used to have. Naomi stood nearby, quiet but not cold. She nodded once. "You can hold her." Elias knelt down, trembling. When Hope reached for him, he froze. Then, carefully, he lifted her into his arms. Her tiny fingers brushed against his face. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. Hope giggled. Naomi watched silently. There was no hatred left, only the quiet truth that time had changed them both. Elias looked up. "Thank you," he said. Naomi simply nodded. After the guests left, Naomi and Elias sat in the backyard. Hope was asleep inside, her birthday candles still flickering in the kitchen. The night air was cool. Elias broke the silence. "I don't expect forgiveness." Naomi looked at him, her voice calm. "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's peace." He swallowed hard. "You found peace." She nodded. "And you can too, if you let yourself." Elias stared at the ground. "I lost everything." "No," she said softly. "You just lost what wasn't real." For a long time, neither spoke. Crickets filled the quiet. Then Naomi stood. "Take care of yourself, Elias." He nodded. "You too." When he left that night, he didn't look back. He didn't have to. Seasons turned. Naomi continued her work, balancing meetings with morning walks with Hope. She smiled more now, not because life was perfect, but because it was hers. Across town, Elias kept teaching. He started a small program for teens who wanted to learn coding. He never talked about his past. He just showed up, day after day. Sometimes he'd see an article about Naomi's success. Carter Tech named one of Atlanta's fastest-growing firms. He would smile faintly and whisper, "She did it." They never reunited. They didn't need to. Each had found redemption in different ways. Naomi raised her daughter with grace. Elias built hope for others through his work. Their love story didn't end with togetherness. It ended with growth. And in its quiet way, that was the happiest ending either of them could have. Months later, Naomi sat under the studio lights of a talk show. The host smiled. "You've inspired millions. What kept you going?" Naomi took a slow breath before answering. "I learned that strength isn't revenge. It's rebuilding." The audience grew quiet. She continued, "You can lose everything. Money, marriage, reputation. But if you rebuild yourself, you haven't lost it all." Images of her journey flashed on the screen behind her. The early days at Carter Tech, the courtroom, the birth of hope. Every picture carried a story of both pain and courage. The host asked, "Do you hate him?" Naomi smiled gently. "No. Hate keeps you tied to the past. Letting go sets you free." The crowd erupted in applause. But Naomi wasn't seeking praise, only peace. When the cameras turned off, she looked down at her phone. A photo of hope filled the screen. Naomi whispered, "We're free now, baby. Truly free." That evening, the news played in the background. A headline appeared. Former executive Victoria Hayes arrested for financial fraud. Elias sat in his small apartment, dinner untouched. He watched her face flash across the screen, the same face that once smiled beside him on red carpets. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel pity. He just sighed, quietly. The reporter's voice continued. Investigations reveal years of falsified records. Elias muted the TV. Outside, the city buzzed as if nothing had changed. He leaned back on the couch, whispering, "Everyone meets their truth one day." For the first time, he realized karma wasn't about punishment. It was about reflection. He turned off the light, the room fading to calm darkness, and for the first time, he slept without regret. Morning sunlight spilled through the nursery window. Hope, now walking, laughed as she played with her toys. Naomi watched her, eyes soft. She knelt beside her daughter and said quietly, "You'll grow up knowing love is not ownership, it's choice." Hope reached out, touching her mother's face. Naomi smiled. "And you'll learn that strength isn't loud, it's kind." She lifted Hope into her arms, holding her close. Outside, the world was bright again. The wind carried the scent of spring, the season when everything begins anew. Naomi looked around the home she built, not of marble or glass, but of peace. She whispered to herself, "This is the life I was meant to build." Months turned into years, and life moved quietly forward. Elias Carter spent his mornings at the community center in Atlanta. He taught young kids how to write their first lines of code, how to believe they could build something from nothing. He came early every day, sweeping floors before class began. The children loved him, not for who he was, but for the patience in his voice and the kindness in his eyes. Sometimes, when they asked why he smiled so much, he said softly, "Because peace is the best kind of success." Across the city, Naomi Brooks stood on a stage, announcing the opening of her foundation, a program for single mothers rebuilding their lives. She spoke simply, "You're not broken, you're becoming." Applause filled the hall, but her eyes searched the crowd and found Elias at the back standing quietly. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. One nod, one smile, enough to say everything. The city lights glowed outside. Two lives, once tangled in pain, now walked in calm, parallel lines, each carrying the lessons the other left behind. Karma isn't punishment. It's reflection. It shows you not what you lost, but what you've learned. Naomi found peace, not through victory, but through forgiveness that asked for nothing in return. Elias found purpose, not through wealth, but through the act of giving back what he once took for granted. Their paths never crossed again in love, but they met in understanding. The world around them kept turning, and somewhere between loss and redemption, life quietly balanced itself again. Hope Carter grew, her laughter filling the home Naomi built with grace. Sometimes Naomi told her daughter stories, not of heartbreak, but of strength, of a woman who rebuilt her world one choice at a time. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder. that healing is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of a new one. Because every woman deserves to rise again, and every soul deserves a second chance.